He is the man at the center of the biggest controversy in the country. I'm not talking about Donald Trump, although he's certainly right there, just on the outside of it. I'm talking about Colin Kaepernick.
It's all part of the same thing.
It's all part of the same thing, but certainly Colin Kaepernick is the one who started all of this, which led to President Trump saying the things he said on Saturday night, which of course you know about now. But we got Colin Kaepernick out in New York, and we got his reaction tried to get his reaction to what happened on football fields across America yesterday, and to what President Trump had to say about him and any other players who protest during the national anthem. Here's Colin in New York City.
Hey Colin, how you doing, man? I just ask you what you think about all this, all the take the knee stuff and President Trump and everything that's going on right now.
Oh, we're
Is it a
okay
huge
right
shock
now.
for you now, or?
We're actually, he's going to go work out right now, sorry.
Yeah, can I just not, I mean obviously this is like the biggest talking point in the...
That's okay.
You got everyone backing you up, you got the NFL coming out, you've got team leaders, you're being called some pretty choice words by the president.
I appreciate the offer, but I'm not doing that today.
You're not going to talk at all today? Okay, man. All right. All the best to you.
I'm really surprised.
Really surprised he didn't say anything?
Yeah, this is the time to say something. He has a right not to say anything. I'm really surprised he didn't.
I don't think he feels like he has to say
He
anything.
doesn't have to say anything.
If you've been...
But
I actually don't agree with that.
But there's a point. There's a point of influencing people, and he is the lightning rod.
I agree that I think
so.
he
Why
should.
wouldn't he do it?
I think I'm just trying to get in his head, and I feel like maybe right now he feels like I don't need to say anything. This is...
But he's the guy you want to hear from.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't agree with that. First of all, everyone knows that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Colin Kaepernick and for Nessa, who's also in that clip. But I think, though, that Colin Kaepernick needs to speak now more than ever, because the message of why he was originally kneeling is actually starting to get lost in all the hubbub involved with the president and even the demonstrations that we saw over the weekend.
Hey, Van, I would argue it is lost.
Oh, no, it is lost. And Van, I agree with you. I think he should say something.
To me, he's the guy that kind of gets this thing back on message.
Yeah, but it is completely derailed now. I mean, now this is it's a Donald Trump referendum.
It's a Donald Trump versus the NFL versus are these guys SOBs, which all of that stuff was ridiculous, and the players have a right to rail against that.
By the way, my takeaway from that video is that he's proud. He smiled when the guy was asking about it, and he's out in public. He's not hiding. He's in front of a Barry's boot camp gym right in the middle of New York City.
Yeah, except the fact is he did something that cost him dearly. And
but that's the other point of the video.
But the message is lost.
If you're talking about that, look at the shape he's in. I think he's also trying to send the message that he looks good. He looks muscular. He's ready to play. There are all these reports that he hasn't been training and he's not ready to go. He looks ready to go right there. If you're
devil's advocate, maybe Colin Kaepernick is actually concerned right now, or even afraid to keep talking about that because he wants to get back in the NFL.
I honestly, I don't think so.
Could be, but I doubt it. I doubt that that's where his mind is right now.
Past the point of no return on it.
Yeah, I think right now the main thing about what we saw was he might want to be in a place where he controls the message and the way that it's going to get out. So you might see him do something where he sits down with someone that he knows and he trusts, and maybe not quite with the guy on the street, not yet. But still, though, what he did and what he started is incredibly important, and it's inspired a lot of people. And he's the source of it. Colin Kaepernick, whether he likes it or not, or whether we like it or not, is more than a football player now.
You do realize there are people who now are kneeling who don't connect to the Black Lives Matter movement and don't really...
The locking arms.
Yeah, but I get it. But I think that it actually does the whole movement a disservice to say that what he did was the Black Lives Matter movement. It was about something. It was about systemic racism and police brutality, which is bigger than Black Lives Matter, which existed before Black Lives Matter and will exist long after Black Lives Matter is no longer a thing.
Can I point out one thing real quick? That during these games, it wasn't just players kneeling and protesting. I read a lot of reports that there were a lot of people booing at the players and telling them to stand up. So there was a lot coming from the other side too. It wasn't just these guys are sitting down. That's how everyone felt. There was a lot of people from the other side.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's now but it's a referendum on Donald Trump right now. That's what this is about, right? I mean, tell me.
But I think the point is, it's still the fan base is still very divided, and a lot of owners, despite the fact that guys like Shad Khan sat down there and linked arms with the players, there are a lot of owners who are still afraid and feel that he's too polarizing to sign to a contract. And I don't think you're going to see Colin Kaepernick on the field this year.
I mean, what Shad Khan did was absolutely meaningless. I mean, to be honest with you, you know, like the locking of the arms is one thing. That's a way. That's definitely specifically for the president. The locking of the arms.
Yeah. He's the owner of the Jaguars.
Right. That's specifically for the president. All the guys who have been taking a knee should continue to take knees as long as these issues persist in the American consciousness, and as long as there's no conversation being advanced about them.
Harvey, one last thing. You know who's going crazy today?
Who?
The NBA. It's media day in the NBA, and all the biggest stars in the NBA are they are teeing off on Donald Trump.
Well, because of what he said about the Warriors in South Korea, right?
Yeah, but like the biggest stars in the league are saying, LeBron spent like 10 minutes talking about it, Russell Westbrook, all these guys are going off on Trump. I think it's going to be very interesting when the NBA season starts next month to see what happens over there.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when they go to Washington, because you're going to see a lot of people going to, you know, a lot of people welcoming
when the Warriors
to Washington outside of the White House.
You guys find this? Isn't this all bizarre? This is the president we're talking about. Like, I'm just for a second. This is really bizarre. Like when I watched this weekend, I thought
the Saturday night thing.
Yeah, this is not.
The Saturday night thing was really disturbing.
It's crazy. Like how did we get here? It's almost as if some people predicted that something like this would happen months and months and months and months and months ago. It's weird.
Did anybody predict that?
Well,
I don't recall.
I just remember that a whole group of people going, "Hey, if this guy gets in the White House, it could be divisiveness and catastrophe and all of that stuff like that."
It's amazing. You know, it's amazing too that people are still working and have to go to work every day when they could have probably anticipated which slot machine is going to produce a jackpot. But that didn't happen either.
Unless that slot machine told people exactly what the numbers for the jackpot was going to be.
Are we back in a slot machine business?
What are we talking about now?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kimberly, and I'm from Baltimore. And as far as it's concerned, y'all president is tripping. He needs to just be quiet. Someone needs to take his Twitter, his Facebook, his everything. Just put him in timeout and don't let him out. He's acting childish.
Now, Tom Brady spoke.
Yeah, now Tom Brady, who of course is famously, you know, a friend of Donald Trump, or at least was, but he finally said something about all of this after the game. Actually, this was Monday morning. On the radio in Boston, and this is what he had to say about Donald Trump's words.
Are you watching that the same way, at least I am, thinking, you know, don't you have bigger things to worry about than whether a player kneels or doesn't kneel for a national anthem?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly disagree with, you know, what he said and you know, thought it was just divisive. You know, I just want to support my teammates, and I always said I'm never one that says, oh, that's wrong or that's right or that's. But I do believe in what I believe in, and I believe in bringing people together and respect and love and trust.
Does he feel like he's walking a tightrope there?
Yeah, I was going to say, for a guy who's so cool in the pocket, seems a little rattled.
He seemed really super rattled, and it was weird to me.
And he had to know that the question was coming, but he is
just dancing on that one.
I think he would have had some, because Tom Brady's known for being so well prepared. You think he would have had a better prepared answer for that, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. He just was so uncomfortable. Make sure to subscribe to TMZ Live to keep up to date on the latest entertainment news.
And if you want to keep watching, click on one of these videos right now.